Hi guys, today we're going to be doing a workout that focuses on Pilates fundamentals. So these are the exercises that give you the building blocks to achieve the more challenging work later on. So in the Pilates world we call this pre-Pilates, and then as we progress through the work it goes into Joe Pilates work. So we're going to start by focusing on alignment. So coming down onto the mat, I always like to use my abdominals to lower myself down onto the mat. Now once the head finds the floor, we're going to spend a few moments just focusing on alignment from the feet up. So you want to feel that your feet are roughly in line with your sit bones, so the bony protrusions at the bottom of the pelvis, and you've got a weight underneath the three corners of your feet, with the same gap between the knees as you have between your feet. And then just checking in with head and neck alignment, so just making sure that your chin is gently nodding towards your chest, your eye gaze is forwards at the ceiling in front of you. And then focus on your ribs, so we want to feel that the ribs are sinking down into the mat, so you should be able to get your hand underneath the rib cage. If it feels like too much effort to get your ribs down on the floor, that would be a reason to put a towel or a pillow beneath your head. So the higher the head is in relation to the rib cage, the more achievable it is to get the ribs on the mat, and that gives the abdominals something to anchor to, so it allows you to use your abdominals better. So once we've organised the rib cage, we're going to find neutral pelvis. So this is one of the most important places to find, in my opinion, because the spine stacks itself from the pelvis. So if a pelvis is not in its correct position, it's impossible for the spine to be. So there's three bony landmarks at the front of your pelvis. So your two pelvic bones and your pubic bone, which is the bone right between your legs at the front of your pelvis. So bring the heels of your hands to sit on your two pelvic bones, lengthen your fingertips towards your pubic bone and draw your thumbs towards one another. So you've created a triangle shape with your hands. I refer to this as the pelvic triangle. Now adjust your pelvis until the three bones at the front of the pelvis are level with one another and your triangle is square to the ceiling. So this is the neutral position of the pelvis. And once we've organised the pelvis, the rib cage, the head and the neck, your spine is as close to neutral as your body allows. And this is the place where your spine is in its strongest position. So now you've found your optimal alignment, we're going to focus on Pilates breathing, which is known as thoracic breathing or lateral thoracic breathing. So you're going to put your hands on your ribs and just slide your hands out to the sides of your rib cage, and then start to breathe deep and full into the back and into the sides of your rib cage. On your in-breath, you're looking to feel a sense of your rib cage expanding out to the side walls and into your hands, and then on your out-breath, you're looking to feel a sense of your rib cage narrowing and drawing away from your hands. Now as you focus on using your breath to bring movement into the ribs, I'd like you to have an awareness of your deep core muscles, and the deep core muscles we focus on the most in Pilates are the pelvic floor muscles and the deep abdominals. So the pelvic floor, I want you to visualise the four bony landmarks at the bottom of your pelvis. So we've already talked about the pubic bone at the front of the pelvis. I want you to visualise your tailbone, which is your coccyx, and then the two sit bones. On your out breath, I want you to feel that you're gently pulling upwards between your legs as though you're lifting up on the pelvic floor as though to narrow those four bones towards one another. And then gently draw your navel into your spine to feel a slight narrowing of your waistband. So drawing your navel in is the action that engages your deepest layer of abdominals, the layer closest to the spine. And when the deep abdominals are engaged, those muscles lend stability to the spine. So your focus is to keep your breath in your rib cage above your belly button so that you can maintain the control of your deep core muscles. So staying with your breath, we're going to start to bring movement into the spine. So arms are just resting at the side of your body. Now on your next out breath, I want you to gently rock your pelvis backwards, tipping your triangle to your chest, and then using your in-breath to release your pelvis back to neutral. So just working between these two places in your own time. And the aim here is to do this with as little effort as possible, so you don't feel that you're pushing to your feet and using your legs. So the action of tipping your triangle to your chest is the action that engages your abdominals. So the less you use your legs, the more you feel the control of this movement comes from the abdominals. Now I like to use this time to feel the integration of breath, muscles and movement. So I want you to feel how your out breath helps you engage your abdominals and how your abdominals gently round your lower back into the mat, and then how your in breath pulls that pelvis back to its neutral position. We're going to do this just one more time, and then maintaining the neutral position of the pelvis now. We're going to start to bring movement into the shoulders, so I'd like you to reach your arms up to the ceiling so the palms are facing one another, and the distance between your two hands remains the same. On an in-breath, I want you to lift the back of the shoulders off the mat, to protract the shoulder blades, and on an out-breath, bring the back of the shoulders onto the mat to retract the shoulder blades. Now, whenever I offer a breathing pattern, I'm offering a breathing pattern that facilitates movement, but you can choose a breathing pattern that works for you. It's more important we focus on the movement at this stage. So again, just like when you were moving the pelvis, the aim here is to do this with as little effort as possible, so you don't feel tension through the head and the neck. The ribs stay nice and heavy on the floor, and there's no change to movement of the pelvis. Now next time when you drop the shoulders into the mat, we're going to keep the shoulders there, so you feel weight underneath the back of the shoulders. Now still staying with the breath, on your out breath I want you to reach your arms backwards to the wall behind you, but only go as far as you can keep your ribs nice and heavy on the floor, and you're going to use your in-breath to reach your arms back up to the ceiling. So the goal here is to make sure that you're not allowing the weight of the arms to change the position of the spine. Focus on deepening the rib cage into the mat as you reach the arms overhead. In Pilates, this is known as closing the ribs or rib cage closure. Now the action of making the ribs heavy on the mat is the action that engages the abdominals, and the abdominals hold the spine. And if you can use an out breath as you deepen the rib cage into the mat, you're doing two things that engage the abdominals, so two things that facilitate stabilising the spine. And we're getting some good shoulder mobility out of this as well. So you might notice that my arms aren't going to the floor. That's because I have tight shoulders. So I'm just working on keeping those ribs closed. We're going to do this just one more time, and then bringing the arms back down to the mat. So arms coming back down to the mat, and I'd like you to bring your hands on the top two corners of your triangle, so your two pelvic bones, trying to keep the back of the shoulders nice and relaxed on the mat. And then on your next out breath, you're going to open one knee out to the side wall, and then bring that knee back in again. So you're going to stay with this movement, and again just choosing that breathing pattern that works for you. Now we call this exercise a knee drop, and this is a pelvic stability exercise. So again, your goal is to keep your pelvis still and stable against the movement and the weight of your leg. Now as the knee opens out to the side, it creates a rotational force on the pelvis. So the weight of the leg is going to try and rotate your pelvis to the right. So your focus when you do this, guys, is to make sure that you're deepening that opposite side down into the mat. So the action of doing that activates the abdominals, and the abdominals, as I said earlier, stabilise the spine. So for me, it's always more about what you're not moving than what you are moving. Now we're going to do one more here, and then we're going to do roughly the same amount of reps on the other side. I always lose count when I start to teach, but in Pilates our rep range is anywhere between 4 and 10 repetitions. So once we get into the movement and the breathing, again, you've got to home in on what you're not moving. So I'm thinking about trying to keep that right side of the pelvis nice and heavy, and only opening the left knee where I can achieve that. So hands are on the pelvis for feedback, just checking those two pelvic bones and stay nice and level, as though you've got a spirit level running from one pelvic bone to the other, that bubble staying right in the middle of that spirit level. So we're going to do this just a couple more times, and all the time I'm working on trying to keep the breath in the rib cage and the up and the in sensation. So those deep core muscles staying gently engaged, having that awareness. So this one is the last one. And then we're going to start to challenge this a little bit more. So on an out breath, lifting one leg up, taking an in breath at the top, and then breathing out to lower, and then changing sides. And again, just choose the breath pattern that works for you. So when you lift one leg up, that's an example of putting load through the spine. And the more load you put through the spine, the more challenged the abdominals are going to be to hold. So you're checking that you're not letting the movement of a weight of that leg arch your back off the floor. Now, because we're only lifting one leg, we've got a similar rotational force through the pelvis here as we had when we were alternating that knee drop. Well, we didn't alternate the knee drop. But the rotational force is very similar here. So because we've only got weight, increasing the weight on one side of the pelvis, the weight of that leg will want to rotate the pelvis to that side. So again, focus on keeping that opposite side nice and heavy on the mat. So I'm going to change the breathing pattern for me now, because I'm going to start to speed it up. So breathing in to lift, breathing out to lower, and just checking that there's no changes in the pelvis and the spine. So keeping your hands in your pelvis or your body is a really good way of giving you feedback. Challenging this exercise a little bit more now. So keeping that leg lifted, and then on your out breath, you're going to scissor your legs to switch. So the two legs find their destination at the same time. Now this is more challenging because at one point during this movement, the two legs are off the floor, the 2 feet are off the ground, so the mat no longer supports the weight of the legs, and that further challenges the abs to hold. So the effort now to keep my ribs closed, to keep the pull up and the draw in is a lot more challenging. I'm trying to make sure the movement of the legs is coming from the crease at the hips as I do this, so not really changing that knee angle. Navel pulling in all the time, staying with that breath. One more scissor, and then taking the feet down. So that's a lot of work from the front of the hips, but you should have felt that the intensity was in the abdominals. We're going to focus now on opening up through the front of the hips, just to counter the work that we've just done. So we're doing a movement called shoulder bridge. So to initiate the movement, you're going to tip your pelvic triangle to your chest, your lower back round into the mat, and then lift your pelvis off the mat, and then start to peel your spine away from the mat, one bone by one. So the goal here would be to lift up onto the shoulders, but lift up to where you're comfortable lifting up to, and then slowly roll down through the spine. So as you roll down, the back of the chest comes down first, then the back of the ribs, back of the waist, pelvis comes down last, and then releasing the pelvis back to its neutral position at the bottom. So focus on initiating movement from the pelvis and driving the movement from the abdominals. So you remember that the action of tipping your triangle to your chest engages the abdominals. So for every bone of your spine that leaves the mat, focus on tipping your triangle to your chest some more. And that's what I'd like you to reinforce as you roll down through the spine. So you really feel the segmental control that your abdominals have of the spine. Now at the top of the bridge, we want to feel that the pubic bone is higher than the belly button. So this bone here is higher than the belly button, and the ribs want to stay closed. So the rib cage should be lower than the belly button, and then keeping that relationship as you roll down. So there's a softness to the chest, the rib cage, but I'm really using my abdominal control to stretch through the back of the waist. So this is a great way of mobilizing the spine. We're also working through the backs of the legs and the buttocks here, opening up through the front of the hips. Now this is the last one, and then we're going to do some work on our sides. Okay, so we've warmed up through those glutes, so we're going to do a glute exercise. So this next posture is called side lying. So side lying does what it says on the tin. So we're trying to find a nice straight line in the body from fingertips to toes. So always check that when you look down, you can just about see the tips of your toes. Your pelvis and your chest should be square to the wall in front of you, head in line with the spine here. Okay, bending those knees forwards for a bit of stability. And for now, just allow your body to sink down into the mat, keeping your top hand on your top pelvic bone with feedback. Revisiting your breath. So in this position, I like to really focus on breathing into the top rib cage. I visualise breathing into one lung only, so really feeling the expansion of that top lung. Now on your next in-breath, I want you to lift the bottom waist and ribs a little away from the floor, and feel that with your top hand on your top pelvic bone, you're pushing that pelvic bone out of your waist. And then on your out breath, you're sinking everything back into the floor. So you're just allowing yourself to go with gravity. Now the action of lifting your waist and your ribs away from the floor is the action that engages your obliques, your side abdominals. And it's your side abdominals that stabilise your spine in neutral when you're laying on your side. Because gravity is trying to sink you downwards, you have to keep that lift upwards against the downwards challenge of gravity. But we're just trying to feel the two positions in the spine, so recognising what it feels like to sink and then recognising what it feels like to lift. So we're going to hold the lift, so this is the neutral position of the spine. And in the neutral position, I'm still thinking of my ribs staying close, so not pushing the ribs forward. So front ribs to back ribs, the two sides of the waist nice and long, just breathing into the rib cage. So the challenge now is to maintain the neutral position of the pelvis and the spine. You're just going to lift the leg up and lower the leg down. So keeping the shape of the leg the same, because the bent leg is a little bit kinder than a straight leg, but when you feel the control of this movement, you could choose to straighten that leg and do the same exercise with a straight leg. So the action of lifting that leg up activates the side glutes and the outer thigh muscles, and these muscles lend stability to the hips and the knees. But for me, the hard bit with this exercise is to make sure that when the leg goes up, the waist doesn't sink down. So it's trying to keep that lift up from underneath. So really working the abdominals all the time. And again, just working the breath with the movement throughout, trying to keep the tension out of the shoulders. So we're just going to do 2 more and then change sides. So releasing down, giving the hip a rub, because that's a lot of work through the hip, and we're going to change sides. So again, check you can see the toes, pelvis and chest square, bend those knees for stability, and then just allow your body to sink down into the mat. I would like to feel head and tailbone and where they are in relation to one another, so try and think of reaching more positionally, thinking about your breath in your ribs, using the in-breath for the lift and the out-breath to release. So this is a nice mobility exercise for the pelvis and the spine. So we're getting a lateral tilt in the pelvis, which is creating a lateral movement in the spine. So we're getting neutral spine on the lift, and the spine is going to side flexion on the lowering phase. So just trying to get that nice movement going on, and then holding the lift. So try and find that your bottom waist is lifting off the mat, or is you're reducing the pressure of your bottom waist on that mat. And then keeping the leg bent for the first 4 repetitions, lifting that leg up and lowering that leg down. So we're trying to keep the knee and the foot the same height as one another, as opposed to doing that or that. So when the knee and the foot are the same height as one another, we're really going into the side glutes and the outer thigh muscles, as opposed to the hip rotators. So we're going to do 4 with a straight leg now. And again, for me, Pilates is more about what I'm not moving than what I am moving. So it's about trying to keep that lift through that waist, no movement in the pelvis. So it's the ability to move your leg independently of the pelvis. So one more, and then releasing down and just give the hip a little bit of a rub. Okay, so rolling onto the belly now, we're going to do some work to activate the back extensors. So to begin with, and this might be quite hard to see, for me, especially at the fundamental level, setup is 90% of a workout. So if our posture isn't in the right place, then the exercise aren't as effective. So it can be quite hard to feel your neutral pelvis when you're laying on your belly. So we're going to find that first. So if you're tight through the front of the hip, take your feet a little bit wider than hip distance apart. Otherwise, aim for your feet to be about hip distance apart. And your pelvis should feel nice and level on the mat. So you're equally weighted underneath those 3 bony landmarks at the front of the pelvis. And you're just letting your forehead rest down on the back of your hands. Shoulders lengthening away from the ears. So we want to be really relaxed with our upper body. So we're going to do some pelvic tilts in this position. So it's a little bit strange when you're laying on your belly. I always like to start with lifting the tailbone upwards to the ceiling and then curling that tailbone under as though to try and round the lower spine. So what you're going to notice in this position is the pelvis doesn't have a big range of motion. It's a really small range of motion for the pelvis and the lower spine because the floor is inhibiting your movement. But try and use the floor for feedback. So on your backwards tilt, as you curl that tail underneath you, you should feel that your pubic bone is the heaviest bone of your pelvis on the mat, but your 2 pelvic bones are still on the mat. And then when you lift the tailbone up to the ceiling on that forwards tilt, you should feel how the pubic bone lifts away from the mat and your 2 pelvic bones are heavier on the mat. And then we're going to find that midpoint. So that midpoint hopefully is that place where those 3 bones are nice and level and there's a sense of space in that lower back. And then just taking the arms out a little bit wider, keeping the head hovering off the floor. Gently reach your shoulders away from the ears and just feel how your armpits gently reach into your waist. And then from here, chest bone reaches forwards towards the front edge of the mat and then upwards to where the wall meets the ceiling. So you're creating a back bend in your upper spine and then let the chest bone come down, let your forehead come down. So your range of motion must be as big or as small as you can keep your front bottom ribs down on the mat. So when we keep the front bottom ribs down on the mat, we isolate the range of motion to the thoracic spine, which is the rib cage part of the spine. And then try and feel that your head only moves back because it follows your upper spine as it moves back. So we're not tipping the head back from the neck like that. So again, if we focus on stabilising through the lower back and stabilising through the neck, we're going to optimise movement through the rib cage part of the spine. And it's the rib cage part of the spine that's least capable of this movement. So by working on it, we're improving the range of motion the upper back has in extension. Now try and focus on maintaining the stability of the lower back from your abdominal control. So instead of squeezing your buttocks together and pushing your hips into the floor, you want to feel that you're subtly drawing your pubic bone up towards your belly button as you pull your chest forwards and upwards. The higher you lift your upper spine, the more control it takes in your abdominals to stabilise your lower spine. So we should feel a nice amount of work through that mid-upper back area. Okay, so when you've done this one, we'll just rest down, hands go underneath the shoulders, push yourself up into all fours, and we're going to counter the extension of the spine now with some flexion work. So we're going to go into rounding of the spine, and we call this exercise the cat stretch. So this can be quite a tricky posture because it can be quite hard to feel where your spine is in space, and it can be quite hard on your wrists if you've got any wrist issues. So you can modify the exercise by making a fist with your hands. You could even come down onto your elbows if you need that option. So try and feel that your back is level, like the top of the table, eye gaze forwards of your hands, shoulders lengthening away from the ears, and then feel to be subtly lifting your rib cage upwards onto the shoulder blades, like you're offering the shoulder blades a shelf of support to sit on, and then perceive that your pelvic triangle is square to the mat. So keeping your breath in your rib cage, on your out breath, curling the tail under to round that lower spine, using the in-breath to release to neutral. So we're trying to keep the ribs, neck and head still. So you're isolating the movement to the pelvis and the lower spine. And the lower spine is the part that's least capable of this movement in most people. So we're trying to improve our mobility through that lower back. And you're using the strength of your abdominals to do that. So you want to feel that strong, what I call the pubic bone to belly button connection. So when you feel the control of that, you're going to curl the pelvis underneath you, lift the back ribs to the ceiling, chin towards the chest, so you're looking at your belly button, try and feel the rounded shape at the two ends of the spine, and then coming back to neutral, one bone by one. Head comes up last. So again, initiate the movement from the pelvis first, try and delay movement through the neck and head as long as you can, so you feel even distribution of movement through the spine, and as you come back to neutral, I want you to keep the upwards energy of the abdominals, so lower belly lifting up into the lower back, rib cage lifting up onto the shoulder blades, head comes up last. So we're trying to feel that strong abdominal contraction, that sense of really using the abdominals to round the two ends of the spine, keeping good shoulder placement. So when we come back to neutral, we're going to finish our workout off with sitting backwards onto the heels and just giving those wrists a little bit of a roll. And stretch through the sides of the body, just walk your arms to one side. Feel that you're trying to sit your hips back onto the opposite heel as your arms reach to one side. So you should feel that stretch down the sides of your body, so from the elbow into the waist, coming back to the centre, and then going to the other side. So really focus on creeping those fingertips forwards as you sit the hips back. So you're trying to feel the opposition, and that gives you a little bit more space in between, a bit more stretch. And then coming back to the centre, and then just rolling up and stretching your chest. Really shining that chest bone up onto the ceiling, and release.